Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right. Thanks, everybody. Okay, so starting back at the beginning here, thanks for your patience. Ari, I'm just so excited to have you there, to have you here with us tonight, because I feel like if we were all able to magically party together, I would be like, I want to talk to Ari. I want to catch up with Ari over drinks and hear what 2020 has been like for you. I feel like you and I never really got to work super closely together when I was in Chicago. Like our work and communities overlapped a lot, but we were both doing our own little corner of the thing and like being like, wow, you're doing great in casting. Keep it up. But we never really got to like hang and do work together. I feel like our process has been kind of simultaneously very similar and very different. But one thing we have in common, and that a lot of, I think, the folks that I hope are excited about engaging with Shred have in common is that we love to reflect on like what we're learning, where we're at in our process. And so I think there's a lot to reflect on in our calls preparing for this interview. I got to get a little bit of a snapshot of what you've been up to, but I'm not even going to try to label everything that you are and do. I just want to say that you're a badass organizer, a force of nature, and you have amazing style, especially at protests. Like I would always look at your style at protests and be like, how is this girl wearing like flame fishnets and short shorts and still looking so like solid? Like when I would get dressed to go to protests, I'd be like, all right, I need to wear long pants and take my earrings out, and I'm not going to wear lipstick. And like, I just love how you were like, I'm going to look my absolute best, hottest self, like in front here, turning up. So I really appreciate your protest style, especially.
Oh, thank you. It's not practical. Well, no, it is practical. It looks not practical, but it actually is very thoughtful.
I'm sure. Yeah, love it. Okay. So before we dig in, and since we had a few little technical hiccups, I do want to, as Shred is, accustomed to doing, take a second to just tune into our nervous systems. You're welcome to do this with us or not. But I'm just going to take a second and see if there's any tension I can release. Take a nice deep breath and really savor that exhale, slow the heart rate down. See if there's anything I can do to make my body or my mind more comfortable. Because whenever we're comfortable and calm, we can be curious and connected. And calm is something that can be hard to come by considering everything we're navigating. So at Shred, we just try to invite it when we can, understanding that we're talking about things that are unsettling sometimes or concerning, and still in that urgency, we deserve rest and calm. One big exhale here. And I'm gonna have a sip of water.
Same.
Hydration is great. Word. All right. Thanks for joining us in that moment of a little bit of relaxation and calm. We also like Shred to feel like a party when it can. And it's especially one of my goals when I'm catching up with somebody who I haven't talked to in a while, to kind of feel like it's celebratory and exciting to be together. So we like it to feel like a celebration. Are you doing anything to bring the party vibe tonight, Ari?
Oh God, I put on my my set it off shirt today because I was like, I just really feel like if I'm gonna be on screen, I gotta be like real cute. And then I felt like I gotta put on the gold chain too. And I definitely may or may not have a piece sitting in front of me ready to be lit. It's party mode.
Absolutely. Yes, I love that. And I love that weed was legalized in Illinois as soon as I left. Super cool.
I'm so sorry. So sorry.
Great. Just kidding. I love it.
When you come back this summer, when you come for a visit.
Yes. Love that for you. I'm drinking some red wine. I'm also wearing this shirt that kind of reminded me of like your style. It's like this cool, like nice little cutout situation. Yeah. So I was like, I'm going to take a cue from Ari and wear a sick crop top.
Oh, I love it. I love crop top. I want everybody to just be cropped forever. We just all should just be belly out.
Yes, absolutely. That's the future I'm trying to live in. Okay, cool. Okay, well, thanks. I'm happy to know that you've got your party shirt on. Love the gold chain. Very excited, looking great, feeling great. So in preparation for this interview, and with all Shred Radio interviews, I try to just get on a call with people ahead of time and make sure that the interview feels good for them. We kind of co-create. And when we were doing that, I asked Ari if there was anything that you really wanted to use as framing for this conversation. And you said something that I've been thinking about a lot as we prepare to launch Shred as a magazine, as a public platform, and thinking about what it means to have a platform and to broadcast regularly, being a host, being an interviewer. It's basically this idea around refusing the idea of celebrity or being put on a pedestal. Like, there's a lot of, discourse happening, especially this year, as it becomes profitable to have some kind of like woke spokesperson on your team or whatever. This idea that like, because we're speaking, we are somehow, on a pedestal or demanding that we are allowed to dominate other people, that we should be considered as like untouchable or somehow more powerful or more worth listening to than everybody else. And I really want to make sure that, as much as we can, we frame Shred not as something to put us on a pedestal or to use to dominate anybody, but rather that they're interested in like talking to people and reaching people, and that we want to ground that locally and start with people that we trust, people that we're like interested in and know that we share some common values with, without putting anybody or ourselves on a pedestal. So that's why I'm so excited to start with you today. And considering this a conversation between people who consider themselves forever in the process of learning, kind of comparing notes. Like you and I are going to be comparing notes, saying like, here's what I've experienced. How's that been for you? We're not trying to dominate each other. We're not trying to dominate anybody else. We're just trying to figure things out. And there's a lot of value in doing that in conversation and community and publicly. And so just kind of getting away from this concept of Shred as a commodity, of ourselves as commodities or as, things to put on pedestals, but rather like we are processes, we are in process together. And we're just going to dive into it that way with that kind of framing. But one thing that is definitely a pillar of Shred that I'm not questioning at least, and that we're trying to kind of uplift as the framework of Shred, is that we need to always remind ourselves that we are animals that exist in kind of this dual world. So it's, on the one hand, a sensory real-time material experience. I'm here sitting in my house, touching my table. I'm wearing these clothes. I understand how much money I have in the bank. I understand my position in the economy as much as I can, given that it's like intentionally masked constantly. So on the one hand, we have our real material experience. And on the other hand, we have a virtual world of symbols and meaning, and we kind of share that world. And we use those symbols and those words and narratives to describe things in the world that are not static. So the things that we're talking about, whether they're ideologies or movements or political labels, even historical figures, people, our favorite writers, all of these are processes. And so when we set out to communicate about them, we are always trying to remind ourselves and each other that what we're actually doing is telling stories. So when we say that like a thing is this or is that, we're using these shared symbols. Hopefully they are useful enough to both of us that we can get somewhere with them. But those symbols exist in our shared virtual world, and they're used to point to very complex processes in the material world. So the classic downfall of language is that we do need to tell a story to meet each other. And also, as soon as we say that story, the thing's already changing and there's all kinds of other context to bring in. So again, this is not something where we're like, we're correct and we know everything. It's more of like, okay, here's where I'm orienting myself with this symbol. How are you using it? How am I using it? So yeah, Ari and I are processes, we're processing. Anything you'd like to add to that kind of framing about our conversation tonight?
No, you put that so well. We're all just constantly learning, figuring it out and making mistakes, but doing our best.
Yeah. And another thing you noted whenever we were checking in is that you are a Scorpio Rising, which means heavy investigation at all times.
All times. The investigator, real slow.
Yes.
Like really in depth.
Right. And what you were saying about how long it takes you to decide to commit to a label for yourself or the work that you do. I love that, considering the time it takes and what it takes for you to feel confident in saying, I believe in this piece and I'm going to work for this for these reasons. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you want me? So like this year or in the last year, and I will like talk about it, just like I feel like there's so many labels out, or just not even just like the fact that there are labels. It's just everybody's so ready to like grab something to like understand what's going on, that they don't always put in like sit and think about what it might mean to take on something, to take on like language, to take on a word and put it to yourself. And like, you know, to say like abolitionist, it's a lot to be an abolitionist. To be an abolitionist is not just a label. Like to say that I'm going to do this, I believe that we've got to abolish the world that we are part of, all the bad that's in it, that you have to change a lot, you have to sacrifice a lot, and that it is constant work to do it. You know, it's just not just a word, and these words feel really hard to claim when I don't feel like myself, when I feel like I don't have it, like I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to say it. I feel like that's a big thing. Not that I haven't ever done that before. I mean, we were all young once. I mean, I'm sure I said like goth before I was actually goth. We made a lot of goths really angry.
The cardinal sin. Oh my God, how could you? Such a
How
poser.
could you're just a hot topic goth? Yes, I was a hot topic goth, but I
Me
grew up in
too.
the suburbs, and that's that on that. Like, I'm sorry. Like, what you do? You come at it the best way you can.
Exactly. I love that. Hardcore hot topic goth over here as well. Loved to go to the mall. Oh God. Wonderful. All right. Well, on that note, perfect segue. What is your origin story? Who are you? Where did you come from? How'd you come to do what you do today?
Yeah. So I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. I grew up at least, or like I'm from Memphis, and then like in the middle school age, our parents moved us to this suburb in Tennessee called like Collierville, and it's right outside of Memphis. Like I think sometimes like here, I don't know. Suburbs everywhere are different, but I know like in Memphis, it's like you have Memphis and then you drive 10 minutes and suddenly you're in Collierville, suddenly you're in Cordova. It doesn't matter. It's not big like Chicago. Chicago is too big. Um, but I like the area that we were in, Collierville, is a very like kind of like newly developed area in like the last maybe 40 years, and it's that way because of racism. People wanted to get away from the Black people that were in Memphis and in like downtown Memphis area and the surrounding city, and started creating these like suburbs where like all of these like large houses are built. And I'm wondering, as I'm describing it, like I'm sure people like thinking of the suburbs and like imagining like see like you should start seeing like these outside malls like Saddle Creek and shit, like, which is weird. Like I didn't know there could be a mall outside. There are like these big houses that all look the same, but like just a little different, like little McMansions. And then there are actual mansions because it's Tennessee and there's a lot of old money in Tennessee. I grew up down the street from the guy who owns FedEx. And he has a large pink mansion, just huge pink mansion. I grew up down the street from a girl who was on my Super Sweet 16. If you ever watched the episode with the girl that had the 6-door pink Hummer, I grew up down the street from her. That house is ridiculous. It is multi-million-dollar house. The thing about it is I grew up in this area, but I grew up in the apartment complex. And we're all like surrounded by mansions and really wealthy white people. And it's like just a few of us that are not white and not wealthy living in these apartments, and like going to school with kids that get like Mercedes Benz for like their 16-year birthday. And not only do they get Mercedes, but they also get like a Mercedes with, you know, the Confederate flag as the seat covering. So, you know, just like it's like a very it's a really odd place. Collierville, very white. I remember moving there and being very afraid. Within the first 2 months of us moving there, somebody set my dad's car on fire. A white kid who his father explained it to us as he was having a hard time dealing with the fact that his mother was dying of cancer. And so because of that, he set my dad's car, covered my dad's car in gasoline, not just like soaked it in gasoline, set it on fire. They said they could see the flames from the street. And so that my father had to get up the next morning, find his car had been set on fire, and then face police who were determined to like prove at first that he had done it himself for some odd reason, that he just got up in the middle of the night, set his car on fire in the neighborhood that he just moved to. I brought that up because I was very afraid. Like I kept having nightmares that KKK was gonna like kill my family, and then this kid sets my dad's car on fire, and he can't even be mad about it because he's a Black man and it's a little white kid with a dying white mother and a rich white lawyer father. who lived in $1 million house down the street. So there's like not a whole lot we could do. But it kind of like set, I think, a mindset for me very early. That was 11 at the time, about to turn 12, start 7th grade, first year of middle school, where I'm from. And like going from this like very like somewhat diverse area and like figuring things out, and then getting into like puberty and whiteness, and not just like white, but like by yourself whiteness. My brother and I were 2 of 11 Black kids in our entire school, in the middle school, which got more as we got to high school. But it just kind of like really like kind of put me in this place of like not feeling necessarily comfortable in myself, and feeling very confused about everything that's going on, and like constant gaslighting. And you know, your parents, they try their best. They like moved us to that area because they really believed that it would be really helpful for us, and that it would be better for our futures. And I think kind of set me on this like mindset now, like in this time of reflection of how we, you know, I don't know, just like how we treat Black children, what we do for Black children for their good, and how we decolonize that kind of thinking. But you can't really decolonize thinking. That's another thing. We'll get there. But we have like, you know, I end up going to this area. I end up experiencing like all of this really very specific racism in the South, that is also in an area where I'm very Black and isolated, but, you know, just really wanting to get out. And I think when I was growing up, I was told, you know, you're going to be an entertainer, because I used to sing. I went to school here in Chicago for musical theater performance. I used to sing, I used to act, I used to dance. I didn't really want to do it, but it was like the only thing I felt like I could do. I didn't feel very smart. And so I was like, yeah, I'll do that. And I will get out of Tennessee. And I did. That was the only goal, was to get out of Tennessee. I got to Chicago, I went to Columbia, and I realized I don't like this. Still feeling very confused, feeling like I'm doing this just because it's what everybody thinks I'm going to do, but just like, you know, trying my hardest. In that time period of being in school, I like got a lot of friends. I got more information. I was introduced to a lot of new things that I wasn't introduced to before, including therapy. And
Hey.
so, right? So I got therapy, and I realized like how depressed I was. I realized I was spiraling at the time. I got myself through college, but then after college, I had a severe mental breakdown. I ended up in the hospital. Was later diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and just like constantly figuring out like how to take care of myself, while also like trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do. And of course, like at the same, like as we're in college, you and I, there's also like Trayvon Martin is killed. Tamir Rice is killed, Corinne Gaines, like all like the list goes on and on and on of like all these things happening in this like movement rising up at the same time. And so like while I'm feeling like really, really lost and like trying to figure out my mental health and self-care, and also like what am I going to do with my life? I'm in my 20s and in Chicago and losing my mind. And you know, trying to accept the support of my friends. There's all this other stuff going on, and I'm like reading more and paying attention, and starting to remember like things that I had been interested in before we had put all of our time and energy into performance. And I watched this documentary that I would not watch now. I tell people about it, but I would not watch it now because I think I've gotten a little further. But it was about the Black Panther Party, and it was on PBS. And it was called Black Panther's Vanguard of the Revolution. And I watched it, and you know, growing up, you know, you hear about Martin Luther King, you hear about Malcolm X and such, but nobody had ever really introduced me to like radical Black history. When I heard about Malcolm X, it was like very specific. Like he was the negative version of Martin. You know, people never really like went into it. And the schools that I went to, I told you, Ruby, like I went to the school, and like even like the teachers were super racist. Like my social studies teacher told me that Africa wasn't developed, an entire continent wasn't developed. And I told her my dad just went there for work. He was in the military, and he just showed me pictures. It's very pretty. And she was like, "That's not Africa. Your father lied to you." I was 12 years old, and the entire class was all like, "Yeah, Ariel, you don't know." Bunch of white kids, and like very adamant that like Africa, there couldn't be anywhere Black people and also like thriving. There couldn't be Black people and structure, society, just like a very, very wild thinking. So like watching this documentary and like hearing like all of this information and like hearing this like history and seeing the way that Black people had risen up, and then specifically seeing them doing something that I had been told could not be done. Because I remember when I was a kid, I had told people that I wanted to start a building or a center for people that could go and they could just eat, they could live, they could have clothes, they didn't have to worry about anything, they could just be taken care of. And my mom was like, well, you have to have a lot of money to do that. And everybody was like, you have to, you know, work really hard. That's not something that can just happen. And they made it seem like something that could never be possible, or that you had to have money to do. And so then I think I kind of was like, yeah, I'll be a celebrity because that way I'll get money, because I'm not smart enough to be a doctor. I'm not smart enough to like run a company, and I don't want to, but like I could entertain, like I could do that. But then realize that that's not what I wanted to do either. I'm watching this documentary and seeing like I could just do the thing. Like I could just
do it. Yeah.
I don't have to like do all this other like workaround. Like people just did it. And I cried very intensely. I called my friend Dan, who is a very tall white man. And I was like, I know exactly what I want to do. Like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Like, I can't do this performing shit anymore. Like, I just like, I like this. I said, I want to do this. Is what I'm going to do. And I put all of my time and energy into that. I kind of just like, like I said, like, with astrology, like I am a Scorpio, and so I'm a Virgo, but I'm a Scorpio rising. And I was like, I need to get to the bottom of this. I need to understand it. And so I kind of just like dropped everything and like just read a ton of books that now some of them I wouldn't recommend. Some of them I read and I didn't quite absorb any of it. Like I talked to you about reading Wretched of the Earth, Frantz Fanon, and not really absorbing it because I didn't fully understand what I was reading because I had no experience in it. But I just read and like just to, like try to develop like some kind of analysis, and then I got involved where like things made sense. Like I felt like for me, most importantly, like housing and such made sense. So I started or like feeding people. So I started a food drive out of my apartment for a while, and then Trump got elected. I went to the hospital again. I got out of the hospital. Or no, I started the food drive after I got out of the hospital. But anyway, that doesn't matter. After I got out of the hospital, I started the food drive. Then I started getting, there were a lot of groups that were holding like open meetings. I got involved in those. But I think like, without like going into like details of groups, just like really through like focusing on like this, I think I began really with this out of like the Black Lives Matter movement, just like Black Lives Matter. And I want to get to the bottom of that. And through that found abolition, anarchy, Marxism, which I mean, we'll talk about. But I found a lot of like clarity, and I feel like it's constantly like, I know you have a lot of questions for me, so I don't want to like spend too much time on it. But yeah, I feel
great
like
framing. No, yeah, this is great.
Yeah, like that's kind of how I got here. Honestly, that's it.
Cool. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I definitely relate to that sense of like feeling very confused and like an outsider growing up, although in a different way. I think like I was able to kind of pass like the kids at my school, like the Black kids knew I was Black, but the white kids were like, what the fuck are you? And I definitely cannot relate to the experience of having like really super racist teachers targeting me, or you know, that kind of stuff. So I'm really happy that you noted that that was the kind of environment you were growing up in, and the kind of like pressure that it would put on you, and also like how it might be hard to find your footing. And I definitely also relate to, I guess I'll just do this because somebody said I could. I went to Columbia for radio, and it was just like, what am I going to talk about though? Like, I don't care about anything they're talking about on the radio. So yeah, I was like, I guess I better go do the work that I know I need to do, and then maybe I'll have something to talk about. And here we are, Shred Radio, ladies and gentlemen.
We made it. Hey, Columbia.
It was all worth it.
Love the debt.
Yeah. Well, I'm so happy that all of that led you to Chicago, and then it led to our paths crossing. I'd love to dig into a little bit more of specifically what 2020 was like for you. I know you were heavily out in the streets. You were doing a lot of coordinating, a lot of organizing, and learning through that process as well. So I'd love to hear a little bit about what it was like for you, anything from 2020. I know you were mentioning how the beginning of the pandemic felt versus when the uprising started, and then where you're at now. And specifically also, I'd love to hear if there was anything that really helped you when things got challenging over 2020.
Oh, girl, 2020. Oh, girl. Okay, so I think 2020 was a shit show for all of us. But I think it there was a moment right as the pandemic hit that I was talking to a comrade at the time, and I was like, I don't think we're prepared for this at all. Like I feel like I've been doing organizing for a few years, and I have not been not prepared for this. Like I'm prepared for, like, you know, like I'll do a press conference about it. I can throw up a press conference in 10 minutes, like no problem. Like I got people, you know, I'm prepared to, like, you know, talk about it. I'm prepared to hop on a megaphone. Like I don't know if I'm prepared for this, you know, or I'm prepared to canvas. But like that moment, like it was very clear what was about to happen to me and like people that I was like talking with. I'm sure for a lot of people, but just like in the scope of I have like not severe. I got serious imposter syndrome. So a lot of times what I'll say is like I want like people to know that I'm not, and not just imposter syndrome, but also like in the way I think it's important we change our language and say things. And so like, you know, I think it's important to name that, you know, as I'm thinking like, oh, we're not prepared for this and I'm not prepared for this, that there are probably like thousands of other people that also were sitting in March going like, whoa, like, wait a minute, like, what have we been doing up until this moment? Like, I don't know if like, you know, so, but I do want to name that. Like, I think that a lot of people kind of were hit with that. But me and my comrades were talking, and we were like, I have no survival skills. Like, you know, like I used to tell my friends at the time, like, I feel like if a zombie apocalypse happened, they just have to take me because I'm not gonna make it. Like, my skills are so. Once I get outside of this apartment, like outside of like the things, then it's hard. And so we had to like really start to like change the way, like very quickly, that we were working. And I realized that I had like a lot of skills that a lot of organized people that were organizing with me didn't have, and that there were other skills that I didn't have. So like really like we began like focusing on like how do we get these skills out? Like how do we make sure like how do I make sure that like, you know, as things start popping off, because we knew that an uprising was going to happen, because you know you like there it was like a powder keg. Like there was no way it wasn't going to happen, and there's no way it won't happen again. I mean, this man just told us he was going to give us $2,000 checks and came back and said, I'm just kidding, I meant means tested 1,400 for some of you.
Way to
So
launch
like
with a huge lie. We can all do that. That's a basic math
like,
equation, sir. Yeah.
you thought what voting you thought this was going to, girl.
Yeah.
So uprising happening part 2, what we learned from 2020 was that, you know, we needed more skills. And I was like, if I get like arrested, or like my friends get arrested, or, you know, anything can happen, like how do we make sure that the work that we've been doing up to this point doesn't fall apart? And how do we make sure that we can all do this so that it's not, you know, falling on the same 5 people every time something happens? Like some of the calls that I would get were like, even we won't even. But I was like, I don't know what I can do with this. I don't know why you're calling me. I'm not Wonder Woman. I am Ariel. I am 29 years old. I am Ariel. And so it started, like things started, they got very intense very quickly, you know, with like being out in the streets. We realized like the way that we were in the streets kind of needed to change. Being like, just like, I don't know. I think of 2020. I think of the way at which we found out we needed to change, and like being more like going into the street and being more experimental. That's what it is. Kind of like being like, how can I imagine outside? Like realizing that everything that I knew up until that point, and a lot of us knew, was kind of within a specific realm, and not in this idea of what was happening at the moment. Not in this idea of like how do we respond to what's happening, and how do we respond to it in a way that is generative, that creates more, that is not just like we're going out and like taking us, like we're opening up space for more people, like as they're angry, to come in. It was beautiful. There were marches every day. There were actions every day. People were getting angrier and angrier, but as well so were the police. They came at us in ways that we couldn't have expected at all. In like all the the time, like, even you hear stories of like, or like movements of the past, and I think we weren't really prepared to like see it as it was happening. And it yeah, it like made us like, like the ways you have to think about like how you go into the street. And I don't know, I'm trying to think of it like, I think of 2020 and I think of a lot of lessons. I think of a
Mhm.
lot of lessons. And just the way that we like care for each other before we're in the street, how we prepare for each other, and like the ways that we need to change. 2020 made me realize that a lot of things that we do absolutely have to change, in order for us to get our collective win.
Absolutely. Yeah, I heavily resonate with that. When I was thinking about how excited I am to talk to you, I had a moment of like, I don't want to say imposter syndrome, but like, who am I to take up an hour of Ari's time whenever like Ari's been, like I felt like a sense of guilt because we left Chicago like at the end of 2019, and I was like, I would love to be with my people. You know what I mean? Like I felt like to watch it through a screen and to be in conversation in real time with folks who are out every day. I was just like, man, I felt like weird about being in a situation where I wasn't plugged into the local situation in Pittsburgh. I really didn't know who to trust. And I think a big part of what you're saying here is the difference between what it looks like to be an organization on paper and what it looks like to be organizing as a group on the street, in real time. And like, we can talk about the work we do, we can measure the pace of the work, we can write a press conference about it, we can write a grant report about it, and we can talk about the philanthropic tendrils that perhaps left us unprepared for this moment, if we consider that as our organizing apparatus. But there's just so much to be said around how we talk about the work versus like what it means to actually be in process together in real time. And everything that you learn in one explosive moment, you can learn 8 different things, and you come out of it thinking, can I even remember that lesson? How do I talk about it with other people? And so a lot of what I hope we can do with Shred is to say, like, what are those moments, and like, how can we, I don't want to say like make the most of them, but just take them and contextualize them and ground them and look at them, so that we can make tools that are like adaptable and flexible in real time, and that don't depend on the language of capitalism or the language of structure even necessarily to determine if it's like a good or bad situation, but rather to like think about how to get consent and how to care for each other in real time. But that there are useful processes around that, and there's a time and a place for writing and thinking and talking, and there's a time and a place for doing, and those might not be separate or together at all times, but kind of navigating that reality. What kept you going when things were really challenging? I'm sure you had some moments that were pretty overwhelming. What helped you keep going through 2020?
Ooh, people, they like we talk a lot of shit about each other. But Chicago has some incredible organizers and people that just like really want to see change and are trying to like figure it out. But yeah, like I have like some really, really solid friends. I really believe in having a network of people. And I think I learned that when when I was going through like multiple mental health crises, like back to back, like having a set group of people that like are always going to have my back, and then like being very clear with others about what's going on. 2020 was like, hey, make sure that you are talking to people, make sure that you're saying what you need, and and that, yeah, that really helped. Like I had just like what was it, there was a there were moments where we were like literally like I was so tired, I wasn't sleeping, I was in the streets every single day, or in a meeting. If I wasn't in the streets, then I was in meetings, so it'd be like a full day of being on Zoom for 18 hours, and then being in the streets for hours and like marching, and then like when it's like hot, and then you come home and like somebody had made food for me, or had like was delivering something, or I woke up one day and like somebody had sent like flowers and a care package, and like people called to check in. For my birthday, a bunch of people from an org I was a part of, they made like a book for me with like like talking, like saying very kind things, and like a gift certificate. It was just like there were a lot of moments that like, even though it was very hard, and there were like a lot of points where I was like, I don't know if I can do this. like, I don't know, like they're just people that were like always there and ready to be like, I got you. And that was very healing, and it made me realize like, oh yeah, we have to change. Like we have to do things different. We got to have more love in this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and consider the fact that, like, yes, we can know what we theoretically agreed on, and we can talk about our shared goals, and also our ancient selves, our animal selves. There's a lot that language can't really cover as far as what we're actually experiencing. So yeah, I definitely feel that. So what does that redirection look like for you? Like, what did you encounter during that time that kind of helped you start thinking about what we should be doing differently? Any conversations or books or theories that were like became like more useful to you this summer?
Oh yeah. So when I had a great conversation with you about like how, like, you know, I feel like I have been uh like I feel like the last few months have just been like eye-opening. So like before, I had, like, you know, I had abolitionist. I had finally gotten to a point that I felt like comfortable claiming that, and organizer, I felt like somewhat more comfortable claiming that. And uh but there, like, anarchy had never really, like, I hadn't really had like any other terms that I felt like super comfortable with. Like I never really claimed Marxism, communism, anarchy, anything, because I was like, I don't know enough of that theory yet, and I feel like I haven't found what makes sense to me. And I started hanging out with this group of anarchists this summer, which I wouldn't actually call anarchists now. I would call them trash, but you know, they are fine. And I don't think that that's like,
Burn.
and that's not just like a jab at that. It's like literally like a thing of like, I'm start being like way more honest about white men. I think what I actually encountered was white men that love, that want to be able to do whatever they fucking want to do. But
Mm.
they helped me actually in the beginning. They were like, hey, here's another world. And I was like, okay, give me books, because I love to read. And I was like, let me read about it. I like, this sounds really cool. Because we, you know, we got into this point where it's like I've been putting in hours upon hours and hours of work on bills that are actually probably going to lead to more state power. And I've been putting hours of work into like marching, and what are we marching for? And it's like I felt like we were not in, like, not only were we not prepared, but we were not responding to the moment in the way that we could have. Like we talk a lot about like the people of the past. We talk a lot about, you know, like you know, Ella and all these people, but we don't really like take those lessons. I feel like we kind of are like, let me just do exactly what the Black Panther Party did, or let me do exactly what SNCC did, as opposed to being like, hey, like, let me look at what they did, and let's look at the people that came out of those orgs and see what their thoughts were. Like, because we know that the Black Panther Party like fell for COINTELPRO, and that they also had other issues. Who are the people that came out of those, you know, and like what did they think, and what did they feel like the next steps would be? Because those people exist, but we don't talk about. We kind of go Black Panther Party, and that's it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Or not everybody, but some of us. And it's like, actually they had a lot of issues. I love BPP too, but we got to talk about the truth. So this group was like anarchists. They're like, yeah, you gotta like totally read like I wouldn't, again, like things that I read first and I would not share to anybody now. But like read like The Invisible Committee, and with this book called The Coming Insurrection, which is like trash. But like I was like, oh, this is really cool. Like this idea of, you know, what if we are like, you know, I don't like I think, you know, and people can fight me on it, and they'll just have to fight. But like I do not believe in this government that we have. I do not. It's got to go. I feel like we're doing the same thing over and over again, and it's like 400 years later after slavery, we're like, or you know, years later, we're here and looking at this moment, and I'm looking at it going like, we have literally built an entire country on top of a whole ass civilization of people who
Mm-hmm.
have been genocided, and you can't reckon with that. You can't make up for that. You can't go back on that. The only thing you can do is be like, all right, well, we got to get rid of it and start over. I think when people hear that, they think like chaos, as opposed to systems that actually already exist and are in place.
Mm-hmm.
um and as I was studying with these anarchists, and then as I realized that kind of like what they were coming from was like this point, this like, it doesn't really matter, but they like, it was like it was a lot of white man theory, a lot of like, you know, you gotta have joy, do whatever you want, you know. And like what they wanted to do, maybe in the right place, but where they were coming from was like not a place of like that made me feel comfortable. And I started talking to one of my friends, and she and her partner are queer women, and one of them is indigenous, and she was talking about like, oh yeah, what they're talking about, like we just do that in the tribes. And I was like, we do that in Black families. And then we were like talking, and we were like, you know what, why don't we just be Black and indigenous? Like, why don't we just like, my big mama like took care of everybody and they all like had like pod mapping before we knew what pod mapping was. Like everybody had like these systems of like mutual aid and self-defense and like and like theory that was just like natural to the systems that we were living in, so, or natural to who we were, and were repressed by the systems that we were living in. And so I kind of was like, oh, let me keep going that way. And my friend was like, yeah, what if like anarchists were like reading more from like Black feminist theory? And so I kind of like moved that way, like, oh yeah, like let's move that. So I started reading out of the Black Panther Party, like people that left. I read Kwesi Balagoon, who I learned about listening to a Lit Review podcast episode. If y'all don't know Lit Review.
Oh, Monica's on. Hell yeah.
Monica, Monica's on. Oh,
and Monica's a Virgo with a Scorpio rising too, so y'all should talk.
Oh,
more.
We do. Yeah, we do. But yeah, I was listening to Lit Review and Kwesi Balagoon, and I was like, huh. And they were like, and Jason Leiden was like, yeah, I learned about anarchy through like punk culture and like white people, and I found that was wrong, and like Crime Think, and I was like, that's nothing. I was like, I'm reading Crime Think on Twitter, like what is he saying? And then like he's like, but like Kwesi was talking about like creation, and taking care of each other and love and like Black feminist theory. And I was like, oh, I have to read this. I told my friend Emma, I was like, Emma, we have to read this book. I ordered 2 of them. We're both gonna read it. It's gonna be great. We're gonna like experience like anarchy. And I started reading him, and I started reading Lorenzo Kamboa Irvin, who was also a part of the Black Panther Party, looking at some of what Assata Shakur was writing a little differently, and like just looking at this like way of like breaking out of like these people that we idolized. We're like, hey, this thing we did, yeah, like it was great and all, but here are the problems with it, and here are the like, we can't do this again, like that we tried, that we can't do that again. Here are new ways we try. And that's kind of where I am right now. I'm in the world of creating Black autonomy, and figuring out all the ways that can happen, and looking at all the ways that creating Black autonomy creates revolution, and what revolution actually means, and when we say the word revolution and revolutionary, and how we're living it. And I think that anarchy is a way of, when you like, again, like it's a label that or anarchists, they're labels that feel like really heavy and really intense. And especially because like when you think about it, you see like a white boy with like crazy hair and who like wants to burn everything down and spray paint the anarchist A everywhere, which is a thing. But that person doesn't have analysis. That person is just like, has a lot of anger at a system that you should rightfully be angry at. But you know, anarchy, kind of like abolition, and because I think abolition and anarchy go hand in hand, is creation. And that's where I am right now. I am in the world of Black anarchism. I read Anarchata, a Statement, blew my freaking mind. So I hope everybody reads it. But yeah,
and you sent that to me, and I was like, I'm gonna read it before we talk. And then I was like, no, I'm not. I'm gonna play the drums for 3 hours instead, because that's where I'm at right now. Yes, and I heavily relate to, you know, the difficulty in sussing out, you know, the behavior that I've experienced in interactions with, you know, primarily white men, you know, who identify as anarchists, from the actual theory and the application. I also do want to I have to do this as my own way of like clarifying, and again, these symbols that we use around like whiteness and what whiteness is, and the fact that it's not a material thing. It is like something that also happened to people who were living in Europe and were colonized by empire in Europe. And so this concept around, you know, like what a white person is, like as James Baldwin put it, like, I don't believe in white people. He said these words, I don't believe in Black people either, but I understand the difference between being white and being Black in this society. Whiteness is an identity that works on exclusion. You know, and whiteness is something that you know, the Irish were not white when they came here. They gained whiteness very specifically by doing the dirty work of white supremacy, of capital, which is to become police, to become the people who will beat workers, who will go and capture escaped enslaved people. You know, that's the way that you can earn whiteness. I have a lot of Polish blood in me. I have a lot of Polish family. Polacks were heavily, you know, like harassed and, you know, forbade from entering whiteness for a long time. And we probably earned that whiteness in large part by being willing to do the dirty work of capitalism, to do the dirty work of white supremacy. And so again, going back to like, you know, when we think about you know, these labels and the way that empire has impacted all of us and the difference of what it is to be white today versus black today and the legacy of chattel slavery on this continent, but then also going to an international scale of like, what does it mean to be, you know, a person working in a sweatshop that's employed by, you know, like somebody like Beyonce, to be frank, you know what I mean? Like, it's not just along these lines of black or white, it's also along the lines of like, do you own capital? Are you exploiting people to cement your power? And when we think about organizing in our organizing spaces, it's very different to say white wealth and white philanthropic wealth versus I'm organizing with white people who are also poor, and what the interactions that we have as poor people who are in the same class versus the interaction we have as a race of people that has been criminalized and enslaved, and then on top of that, all the dynamics between the various people who have come in and out of whiteness. Whiteness seems to be ever expanding and welcoming more people in, because it's losing its power. It doesn't make any sense, and we're all realizing that. And so it's like, you can be white if you want to. Everybody come along and be a white supremacist. And so just breaking down that term and being very clear that like, there is a lot of behavior that we can attribute to white supremacy, and also there's a lot that has nothing to do with our DNA and our history there. And just the international. Yeah.
I love, because I think one of my friends, like my friend and I will always say, like, I don't hate white people, I hate whiteness. Like, whiteness is a disease. Because like you said, like before people were white, they were Irish. Before they were white, they were Polish. And then you got white people.
And then even like, yeah, even like Ireland and Poland are countries. That says nothing about like like you were saying, the grandmother takes care of the neighborhood though. You know what I mean? Like, that is how we evolved. That is where we come from. And, you know, it can be taken away from us in any number of ways. And part of how it's taken away from us is this false sense of like,
white supremacy.
You know, exactly. White supremacy is the myth that white people are somehow better than black people, which is required if we're going to allow slavery to continue as it has in the prison system. And so again, with what we're trying to do with calling into attention the fact that we're using these symbols that are really useful to describe how we interact with the system, and also that system is just a myth. And so keeping those layers active in our minds as we organize, as we build our tools out. And I'm really looking forward to digging into this with you in one or many ways with Shred, this tension and friction when we talk about Marxist traditions and anarchist traditions. I think it's been happening for a long time. And I think it's coming into more view now, especially as a lot of us have been more taking in a lot of information and political education through things like Instagram slides, talks, you know, off the cuff or more institutionalized talks. These frictions between the traditions and the histories of Marxism and anarchism, or rather these traditions as processes, among the constellation of many other labels we have for how we talk about our politics and our communities. So I personally I do feel an emotion of defensiveness whenever we talk about Marxism being critiqued. I find a Marxist framework to be so incredibly useful when framing what's happening with our global economy now, especially with regards to industrialization and centralized wealth in Europe, and the legacy of colonization that has taken wealth from other parts of the world and piled it upon European and now the United States empire. And so whenever I think of Marxism, I don't think of it as like, I'm a Marxist. Even Marx himself was like, please never call me a Marxist, but rather that it's a useful framework to talk about how the economy is functioning and our place within it. And again, and also to understand why the police exist as they do, why they're able to use this label of we're here to keep you safe, when really what they do is they protect capital, they protect wealth, they protect material wealth and buildings, and they keep us from organizing and freeing ourselves. But I'm also interested in challenging authoritarianism and specifically capitalist hierarchy. And I feel like a lot of common ground can really get swept away when we feel pressured to identify as either a Marxist or an anarchist, as if they're in conflict. So again, these are not static ways of being. They can be ways of describing how the economy is functioning, how we are interacting as workers with the material world, and also how we interact within our community. And so there's a lot of different historical trajectories that these words are attached to. And they can kind of help us figure out how we're existing together. And what's useful for me especially is understanding our circumstances and how we're going to change them. So there's a usefulness for a Marxist tradition that says how are we going to organize our workplaces to seize the means of production, to take back what has been stolen from us as the working class, that we have built up this infrastructure, this technology. I'm not interested in walking away from that. That's mine. It's ours. Like, my people fucking worked in the steel mills and were enslaved and built this wealth up. I'm not saying I want to go over here and have nothing to do with seizing that money and that power and that resource back. And I think that's where sometimes we lose each other. And like, I know you and I share that, like, I don't think you want to walk away from everything we've built. You know what I mean? So I'm really interested in digging into what it means to kind of identify with these labels. And one quote that I really love, I got to see David Harvey speak at the 2019 Socialism Conference. And the way he put it is, I'm a Marxist so that one day we can all live like anarchists. So he's basically saying a Marxist framework will help us to liberate our resources so that we can have them, and so we can interact without hierarchy and without this kind of hoarding, and we can get our shit back. But there is a Marxist lens that will help us within that effort. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of that, specifically the friction.
Oh yeah, I think I had a friend that was like, yeah, you can be anarchist and communist at the same time. I think people get really hung up because of, like, with everything, like you know, when you tell somebody like you're a feminist, and then obviously they're like, you're gonna burn a bra, you're gonna get rid of all men, you're gonna do that, you know, which is very which is like so ridiculous, like, and it's like, but it's because they're the people they hear the loudest, you know, are what they Tumblr feminists or whatever, which is like kind of, Tumblr isn't really a thing anymore. I'm 29, but
I recall, yes.
once upon a time there was Tumblr.
Learning a lot there. Great political education platform, honestly.
But like, it's what
it.
Twitter is, but like slower. But Twitter is like really intense. But Tumblr was, back in the day, like, figuring out you're gay on Tumblr was so nice. Oh my gosh, just so gentle. Figuring out you have ADHD on Twitter is a journey. So, like,
time is speeding up.
Like, wow, yeah. So, but yeah, so like, people, they hear these labels and they think of like a very specific idea, and they go, I don't like it. And it's like, you know, kind of some of these things we have to like sit and like read on. But when I definitely understand like the hesitation though too. Because like, I don't, like, a lot of this, I'm still like, I love saying like I'm still constantly learning, and I know what I don't want, and I know what I don't want is authoritarianism, and what I don't want is hierarchy, and what I really don't want is to have new, like, exchange power, you know what I mean? Like, I don't believe in this world, like, as much as we've built. I don't believe in this world. Like, this world is it's got to go. It has to go, and I don't want to fix it. I don't want to heal it. I don't want to. It's got to. And when I say that, and like anarchata, in anarchata a statement, people will read that, and I don't mean like I want the world to end. Like, I mean like I want this world to end. This world that we are living in and that we are contributing to, and constantly like working ourselves to death to keep alive, has got to go. Like, there are other ways of being, there are other ways of living and taking care of each other. And I think what I like about anarchy is that it is this idea of like breaking away from what we are in, because like seeing, like, especially like when I described to you And I described to other people about anarchy, and one of the reasons why I got into it, and why I feel like just the work in general is so healing for me, is because I didn't. I said, I've had like multiple mental health crises, and I feel like, you know, on top of having actual mental health, because that is a thing, and I don't want anybody to ever think that that is not a thing. Um, on top of having mental health crises, this is also this world, this really messed up world that is constantly telling us that everything that we do is wrong, that the way that we are is wrong, that, you know, or like even like just that experience of being in my social studies class and my teacher straight up telling me that Africa, the entire fucking continent, isn't developed. And then my father is lying to me and doesn't know what he's talking about, while knowing full well that it is the same thing as kind of growing up and experiencing racism and sexism and homophobia and all, and people being like, it's not that bad, you know. It's
Mm-hmm.
not like what, well, we have, you can walk out into the world, see, like, oh, you're not a slave now, see, and you're just
Mm-hmm.
constantly being gaslit, and it makes you feel crazier, and it makes you feel very alone, and it makes you feel like there's nothing that you can do. And anarchy told me, like, hey, all of this stuff, it's all real. Marxism, when I first started reading about Marxism and communism, it was from a very white, and I think that this is like kind of like, you know, like the issue of like how we do political education too. It's from a very white perspective, and it was like, these people have no clue what I'm experiencing, that or what Black people experience. They're not talking about Black people. They're not talking about Black women. They're not talking about Black trans women. They're talking about white people with jobs.
Mm-hmm.
White people with jobs. And it's like the Black people that are like straight up just trying to heal and live are not like over here trying to hear about what you think the world should be. And that's not to say that that's never been a thing. The Communist Party definitely did a lot of work going into Black communities. Like, I don't want anybody to hop on my Instagram DMs after and be like, all right, you know what I'm talking about. Like, there's a huge history of the Communist Party, Marxists being very involved in Black communities and the work that we do, and people taking that on. But there is also a large history of Black people straight up being like, fuck the Communist Party. Angela Davis,
Mm-hmm.
everybody's fave, being one of them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like Lorenzo Camboa Irvin, and all these, like, we're just like people, you know, people love to talk about Harry Haywood. Harry Haywood said, fuck the Communist Party. So like, I don't, the thing is, it's like, we're it's like constantly figuring out, like, with these labels, like, what is it that makes sense for my win, or not my, our collective win? How are we
Mm-hmm.
going to get there? And so when I think of like, I just always go like, if it doesn't have authoritarianism,
Mm-hmm.
if it rejects white supremacy, if it not only rejects white supremacy but acknowledges white supremacy exists,
Mm-hmm.
and that we are not going to get any collective win if we don't deal with racism,
Yeah.
like actual racism, you know, then I can't, then I don't really want to do it. But yeah, I hope that that kind of answers. I feel like I went all over the place with that response.
Well, no, I think again, it's like I think if I were to listen back to what I said and what you said, and the thing about this is we're doing it in this context of now we're broadcasting to the internet, and what we said is what we said. But again, we are in process. I want to talk to you for 5 days about this. I want to like co-make a thing to like sort out where we agree and maybe where we don't, or like find each other's like what we're missing, because I know that like I want to live in the world that you want to build. You know what I mean? Like I know that the two of us and all of our comrades could do shit way better than anything we've seen since the beginning of the, you know, European empire. You know what I mean? Like there's so much more that we could be doing. There's so much more we have already done. The majority of our history as a species and as animals on this planet is so much better than what we've been offered and what we've been forced into under capitalism. And so it's that pulling out like what actually resonates with us as true, what feels sustainable and doable, and how we want to talk about it in a way that's going to help us all organize to take action together and to overthrow our shared enemies.
Yeah.
And so finding ways to say like, you and I are different, or, you know, there's a person in my organizing sphere that I don't agree with in these ways, but I think we can organize, and we need to be talking to people who we don't already agree with. Like that's the role here, is like, oftentimes I felt like my work was a lot of preaching to the choir. And in Chicago, there's a beautiful choir and I love it. And I love that I was able to be in that choir and to learn and to interact with it. And also leaving leaving my experience there and saying, okay, but half my family voted for Trump. That's on me too. What do I do about that? I'm not going to be able to take to them this friction between anarchism and capitalism. I'm going to have to take a very different approach whenever I'm talking to people who are just like living their lives and have been had these ideologies shoved down their throats to excuse their own suffering, and how I'm going to phrase that with alignment and solidarity with you and with others who are not in that same experience. So something along the lines of like finding where we can link together and also understanding that our methods are going to look really differently. I think all of that is really exciting and useful. So